My name is Steve. Welcome to my shop. This video has been a long time coming. Back in November, I released the Tool Fest 2021 video where I built the hammer, riveting hammer that Mr. Pete had done. I call it Mr. Pete's riveting hammer build. And I decided then that I wanted to heat treat it and grind it. So this video will be heat treating and grinding Mr. Pete's riveting hammer. I have a Hotshot 360 oven that I purchased from Stan Zinkowski, Bar Z. And it actually is one of the last ones, if not the last one, produced by Stan before American Rotary took it over. They rebranded it as American Kiln. I have not done any heat treating with it yet. I did run it through its break-in cycle, and I used it one time to do some heat bluing. But when I purchased the oven, I also purchased the argon kit for it. And Stan was out of them at the time, and he shipped it at a later date. So I have finished installing the argon kit. I think that I have programmed the controller. So I'm going to bring you around. I'll show you the oven, the configuration of it. And we're going to start it up, and it's going to heat up my shop. I hope. It's only 40 degrees out here today, a little chilly, and I have some lathe work to do. So while the oven is heat treating, I'm going to be doing a small production run on the lathe. So let's get started. Okay, here's my oven. I've got the argon attached to it. There's a flow meter here, and I've got it hooked up to a bottle of 100% argon. So what I'm going to do now, I have put a couple of pieces of the fire brick in it to raise the hammerhead up. I wanted it approximately in the middle of the oven, to give it as even a heat as possible. So I'm going to close it up. I'll start the argon flowing. Just take and set it between 4 and 5 on the scale as recommended by Stan. Power it on. Yeah, it shows it being around 44 degrees here. Run, yes. Program. Now already I've got a problem, because that's not the temperature that I set. And I wrote the program to the controller, and I wanted to raise it up to 1570 degrees Fahrenheit in 30 minutes. And then I wanted it to soak for another 30 minutes at 1570. And for some reason this started out at 550. So I've got to try and figure this out, and I'll bring you back. Well, I reset the temperature for 1570, and it's climbing up there. And it seems to be in manual mode. Okay, looks like I just blew my circuit breaker. Okay, I'm back in business. That was my fault. I have a radiant heater and I had forgotten to turn it off. It's on the same circuit and I left it on when I turned the oven on. So now we should be in good shape. I have run the oven on this 20 amp circuit before and never had any problem. But in the meantime, I've got to figure out how to program this thing. So for now, I will be doing it manually. I'm going to let it come up to 1570 degrees, and I'm going to hold it there for at least a half hour. Since it's getting there a little faster than I wanted it to, I may hold it at that temperature a little bit longer. So I'm going to go do some work on my lathe, and I'll bring you back in about an hour, and through the magic of video and editing, it'll be about 10 seconds. See you later. Well, I've been running the oven just about an hour at 1570 degrees, so I'm going to turn the heat off. And I preheated the oil. The oil was very cold, so I set it on top of the oven and preheated the oil. So now I'm going to take the hammerhead out of the oven and quench it in the oil. I have the oil sitting on the floor. I don't want to take any chances on ended up spilling it all over the place. So I got to put a glove on. That is hot. Shoot, it's stuck. Stuck to the board. Okay, got it. Well, it is smoky. There's the hammerhead right out of the oil. Doesn't have a bad finish on it. It's I use the argon, so it doesn't have any scale. It's black, there's no question about that, but there's no scale on it. So now I've got to let it cool down. I'm going to let the oven cool down, and I'm going to temper it at 450 degrees. Okay, I've got the oven back down to 450, which is where I want to temper it. I left the piece sitting on top so it didn't get chilled. I'm going to put it back in the oven. Close it up. I'm no longer using the argon on the temper. So I've turned the argon off and put a plug in the hole. I'll enable the heat. And I'm going to let it sit there at 450 for about a half hour. Bring you back. Now the hammerhead has been soaking at 450 degrees, between 450 and 475. It's holding at 450 right now for at least an hour. So I'm going to take it out now and quench it, and it should be ready for grinding. Okay, I'm going to let it finish cooling off, and we'll take it over to the surface grinder. Okay, here's the hammer head. It's all hardened and it's been tempered. So what I'm going to do now is use my hardness testing files and see if I can get an idea how hard it is. I expect it somewhere between 50 and 60, so I'm going to start out with the 50. The 50 skates right off of it. "55 skates, but is starting. Okay, and the 60 grabs. So it's somewhere between 55 and 60. So now I'm going to go take it over to the surface grinder, and we're going to put a nice surface ground finish on it. I set the hammer head up in my small grinding vise, and I got it set with a dial indicator, and I've got it within 1/1000th, and that's on the tapered end of the head. And the reason I'm going to grind that first is because I already had the wheel up in this position after dressing it, and rather than run it all the way down and have to run it all the way back up again to put it in the vise, I decided to do the two tapered ends first. So let's reset the vise now, and we'll start grinding. Okay, I'm all ready to grind. I've got the piece set up at an angle, and there's two reasons for it. The first reason is that your eye has a tendency to go to the longest axis of a part when you're looking at the finish, and so by doing it at an angle like this, it kind of tricks the eye into seeing it a little smoother than it actually is. But the other reason, and actually the more important reason, is that it cuts down the dwell time on how long the stone is in contact with the metal, and it doesn't build up as much heat. If you're going the length of it, the stone is in contact with it much longer than it is going across on a diagonal like I have it. So I'm going to start up the coolant. I use the cool mist type coolant, and we'll start grinding. I'm going to go down about 1,000. My step over right now is 50 thousandths. Okay, for my finished pass, I'm just going to go down 5/10, and I'm going to cut my step over to about 25 thousandths. Now I'm going to go back the other way and just spark it out. Not going to go down anymore. You can see just a tiny bit. Okay, there's the finish. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to turn it over and do the bevel on the other side. Actually, I've got to regrind this. Whether you can see this or not, but this edge, it didn't pick up that edge. That's a little bit low, so I'm going to go through until I pick that up. I'll bring you back when I do my next setup. Okay, I got it that time. You can see that edge goes all the way to the corner. I had to take almost another 6 thousandths off of it to get to that point. Apparently when I cleaned it up on the belt sander, I rounded that edge off a little bit. So I'm going to flip it over and do the other side. I'll bring you back when I'm down to my finishing steps. This is the final grind, the last side. Just touch off. Go 1,000, start up my coolant. My rough grind, I'm going down 1.5 thousandths. Got a lot of material to take off. After I finish machining these, I put a finish on them on the belt sander, not thinking that I was going to grind them. And so they're a little out of whack from that. Got it all. I'm going to go 1/1000th more before I start my finishing cut. Yeah, I've got the whole thing covered. I'm going to go 5/10. Okay, I'm going to do a spark out run. And now I'm going to go down to a finished cut of 2/10. It'll spark out. We'll take one more spark out run on it. And that'll do it. Pretty happy with the finish. I'll take it off and clean it up. Off camera, I took it over to my Scotch-Brite wheel and just knocked off the little edges. They were real sharp after grinding them. So I knocked off all the edges, deburred it, and I fit it with a nice old school hickory handle. And almost 50 years after I took metal shop in high school and didn't make a riveting hammer, I now have a riveting hammer. I want to thank Mr. Pete for providing the drawing of it, and that was posted on the MyHeap website. If you're interested, you can go to myheap.com, and I'll leave a link for it in the description. You can make your own riveting hammer. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please give me a thumbs up. Comments are always welcome. I try and answer all the comments. And I'll see you in the next video.